Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 34 of This Valorant Life. In this episode, we're going to be exploring Adam's journey back to Radiant. You're going to get to 1200 RR this time, right? Top 10, right? And anyways, Adam is taking time off from Valorant for the past year, just coaching, and now he is back on the climb, and he's struggling with his mental and his mindset. And so we thought it'd be super topical for us to explore that. Just what is Adam thinking? What's his frustrations in the game? And we think this would be really helpful for you as you explore what you think your frustrations are. So if you're listening to this, maybe consider what your answers are to some of the questions that come up and consider what strategies might work for you. So with all of that, Adam, why don't you tell us about, like, if you were to put it in like a nutshell, this past week, you said it was pretty challenging. What's been going on and what have you been noticing in yourself?
Man, there's a lot, but I think in the nutshell, I feel that I give up a lot more easily than I
Mm.
thought. And I almost feel entitled. Um, in my notes, I put, I'm acting like an entitled Karen because basically one of the biggest triggers for me mentally is when I make a comm or I make a plan and it gets ignored. And um,
Mm.
it feels like there's like betrayal or like some type of injustice there where
Mm.
that reciprocation should be given because we ideally have the same goal of winning. But when I make like this whole plan or like I'm like, oh, can we do this? I like drone A, come A, and then they go mid and just die. Um, it immediately triggers me, and then I just don't want to try anymore because
Okay.
like it feels like if they're not going to try, I don't want to try. Like what I'm putting my efforts into the void, and like upon reflection, it feels like I'm acting like a Karen. I feel
Mm.
entitled, um, and it's gotten better, but I still have like I don't. Um, my emotions aren't as outward
Mm.
now that it's been because I just finished week 4 and I was having that experience in week 2. So even though it's been like I guess um, a few weeks, um, I've made a little bit of progress where it doesn't feel as external where I'm like blaming my teammates, but I'm suffering internally with my performance or like keeping my head in the game, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. So one question I have for you is, like, when you first came back, and obviously it was a little different because when the first week you came back, you were playing at a different rank. So the games were different. But did you notice this in yourself more or less then? And how has that evolved over these last 4 weeks?
I didn't notice it as much, but I also kind of had the expectation because it was the end of the act, and traditionally, end of the act games are worse than um, games during the act. So I kind of was going into it with that like little mental barrier, but also I could just play my placements and like whatever rank I was like, there was like I guess less pressure on me to do
Mhm.
whatever. But like as I started to climb and like I kind of felt like I should be winning more games than I was. So like the outcome wasn't reflecting on how I thought the journey would go. Um, because if I'm being honest, I was like, oh, I should be able to get back to Immortal relatively easily. In the first week, I went 3 wins and 11 losses, and then the second week it was slightly better. But even though it was slightly better, I thought it should have been easier than it was, if that makes sense.
So where do you think that that mindset of, like, this should be easier, or that kind of subtle expectation, um do you think that's helping you or not helping you in your climb?
Not helping. I mean, if I were to try to reflect on that, I would say I'm not having a beginner's mindset. I feel like I'm owed the outcome because I was there before. So like in my head, I still think of myself as a radiant level player when in practice I'm not there yet, and like closing that gap mentally uh, is frustrating. Whereas like maybe if I just accepted like when I first started, hey, I'm not going to be a radiant level player. I might just be an immortal level player.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm an ascendant level
Mhm.
player, right? But like approaching with a beginner's mindset would allow me number one to have a learning mindset and like a growth mindset, and number two to actually approach my mistakes as mistakes and looking more at myself instead of my teammates. Because right now I'm like it literally feels like I'm looking at a lot of my teammates. Oh, they're playing poorly. They're not listening to
Mm,
me. That's making me play bad. And I know that's wrong, but that's just like what happens.
mm,
And that's like the first place my mental goes to, if that makes sense.
mm. Where do you think it comes from that you're focusing on their team, they're like they're playing or their style or their mistakes or the things they're doing like more than your own?
I guess it is because the playbooks and the way that I approach certain maps with certain agents, I kind of thought I had solved before when I played. Like the way I approach Ascent is very structured. If I'm playing Omen on Ascent, I like to play certain spots, and that formula worked really well for me back when I was still playing.
Mhm,
And I didn't have to kind of strong arm my teammates back then to follow that formula. And maybe it was just because it was more in meta then,
mm,
or maybe I was calming more. I couldn't really tell you, but like um, it worked before and it's not working now. So it felt like it had to be my teammates.
mm,
And if they just did what I was expecting them to do,
mhm,
then it would work out. And I do think that is true, but there is inflexibility in my perception of the game and my playstyle.
mhm. You're kind of like you're forcing, right? Like I think like there's an element of like when any of us are playing well at any of our levels, there's an element where the game feels like it's coming to you and you are being just active enough and just responsive enough that it flows, right? And I get the sense that maybe that level of expectation of it being easy, your level of expectation around your past skill level means that when it isn't working, you're just kind of like doing it again. There's that Simpsons quote, which is, we've tried nothing else, or we've tried nothing and we're all out of options. And it's kind of like that here. You're like, well, this worked before, it should work now. And I'm just going to keep like hammering it. And if it's not working, then it's obviously not me. It's my teammates who couldn't play a game of Valorant to save their life.
And I can give you an example. I generally play a flood playstyle on defense. I like to
On retake or just on the initial kind of execute
on the initial
game,
execute. Like if I'm rotating, I try to encourage my teammates to
fight.
stay alive so that we can fight
Okay.
together. And if I'm on the site, I will try to stay alive so my teammates can flood and help me. A few times, specifically on Ascent, I can think of when I was on A site and I was playing my life. I smoked, I blinded, maybe I got a kill, but I intentionally didn't TP out. I just smoked mid site and stayed on site, assuming that my teammate would run through the tree smoke or my teammate would rotate heaven and fight with me. Lo and behold, by the time I die, I check the minimap again. Like they're just not there. I'm like, what? Like how'd that happen? Because I swear my tree player was there, but then he ends up like going around to heaven or he's on catwalk,
Mhm.
and that happened a few times. And me being inflexible, I'm like, where's my help? Where's my help? You know, like I should have done like I was on site for so long. Where are you guys? And like objectively, that might be the correct play for a highest win percentage. Um, but if I just number one calmed my teammate in the pre-round
Mhm.
and said, hey, I'm going to stay on site, try to rotate, or recognize that they're not going to be there. Like after I throw the mid-site smoke, for example, instead of looking for a fight, maybe TPing out.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm not trying new things. I'm trying old things, expecting them to work. And I think that's very difficult for me to break out of because I have the feedback cycle from before of XYZ thing working, and experimenting with new things and learning new things on how to make that work is alien to me. And it's been 4 weeks, I guess weeks of weekdays. So it's like, I think today was day 19 or day 18. And I haven't looked at any of my VODs, and I haven't looked at any pro VODs thinking that I could kind of just play my way through the ranks with my MMR. And after I ended stream today, I looked at my win rates. I was like, okay, I'm losing a lot on Icebox. I'm losing a lot on Abyss, and I need to like figure out how to play those maps and figure out agents I want to play on those maps because whatever I'm doing right now is not working.
What like if you were to just kind of step outside yourself and imagine that you were advising yourself, like your issue right now is your client's issue, like a student, and they're coming to you, like what do you think you would say to them?
Prepare more. Like I'm just hopping into the game, preparing mechanically, but I'm not preparing with the playbook stuff. Like I haven't even played Abyss before, and I didn't do the work that I need to do to approach Abyss. Like I looked at like stuff for my clients, but I never actually made something that I wanted to play for myself. And it's ironic because I tell my clients like we do map specific approaches. We will prepare yourself on a map. You should have like certain ideas of how you want to play against their comp, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just kind of like Q because I was thinking that I wouldn't have to put in that effort until I hit Immortal 3 because my MMR would carry me there.
You know what I feel like this reminds me of is like, and this is like a real world thing, is it's so common. In fact, actually, this is now that I'm thinking about it, it's so similar. There's a common thing where people in the workforce feel like they're entitled to that next position. They look at their boss or their manager and they're like, I could do that. Like, just give me the promotion. Like, I'm ready. And that's like a very self-centered or like a self-absorbed way of looking at it, because if you're the manager, you'd be like, well, how do I know you are able to do it? I'm happy to promote you, but you haven't done anything that shows me that you can. And so my advice to like lots of people in that position is, don't wait or ask for a promotion. If you think you can do that job, just begin to start doing those types of duties. Make those calls. Obviously, you're going to have to respect your elders or the people above you and respect the chain of command or whatever it is. But if you can start to prove that you can do those tasks, then at at best, you will show that to upper management and you're going to get the promotion. At worst, you're going to prove it to yourself that you can do it. And if the company doesn't realize you can do it, well, some other company will, and you can just go work there and you can make that promotion happen for yourself. The previous way of just expecting someone to give it to you, like it never works, because it's asking someone else to take a chance on you rather than you doing the work for yourself and just making it happen. Right. I think this idea of like an internal locus of control, believing you can affect things rather than external locus control. And it seems like, Adam, like the way you're talking about is that that internal external locus of control has slowly, because of your expectation to just be able to steamroll back to Radiant, has moved from internal to quite a bit external of yourself.
Makes a lot of sense. The first thing that comes to mind for me for some reason, I get DMs or emails from like people asking, "Do you need an editor? Do you need a thumbnail guy? Do you need whatever? I can help with this business funnel, whatever." It's like called email pitches, and every time I see stuff like that, I'm like, "Oh, it would be cool, but I don't know anything about you." Type like, and at some point, I stop responding to them because it's just an email with text, and there's no like portfolio or like maybe no sample thumbnails or no sample like 30-minute edits. There's none of that. So it feels like a waste of time.
Mm.
And when I think about that in relation to how I approached Valorant this time around, I didn't do the creation. I didn't build out my portfolio. I didn't do all that stuff before sending the cold
Mm.
email. I just jumped into the ranked games. And now I think part of the reason why that happened is number one, I thought my problem would be unresting mechanically
Mm.
and not unresting game sense wise.
Mm.
And I thought that the meta wasn't going to be that developed, especially since I've been coaching clients. Like I should be kind of up to date on what's happening. But in reality, there's a lot more nuanced details that I'm missing. Like Abyss obviously is a new
Yeah,
map,
for sure.
but Binds is kind of the same map as it's been before, but there's just different agents being played. Like when I played, Sky was like meta,
Yeah.
and we would have Brim Viper all the time. But now in the game, there's Clove, and people are picking Vice, which has been terrible to play with, by the
Yes.
way. And Chamber just got buffed.
But also just the prevalence of like neon and these movement agents that play the game really differently. They fast rotate, um, and add a different element than when it was just 100% jet or like 100% or like basically 50-50 jet rays.
I mean, I'm so glad you brought up Neon. I literally can't kill Neon. Like, there's a clip of me kind of just ranting. This Neon's just running around with the judge. I can't kill him. And I was literally ranting to my duo. I was like, um, I am physically not good enough to shoot this guy in the head because he's just jumping around. And literally the Neon's just going like this. And I'm like, I'm physically not good enough to kill. I don't know how to kill him. And I've had that experience pretty much like every single game I played against Neon. And to me, that's like, I would think that's a mechanic issue.
Mm.
But it could just be that I'm approaching the space that I'm contesting the Neon the exact same way how I would approach the space against a Raze or a Jet, which would be util to separate the entry and fight that guy. But the problem is when I would fight the Raze or the Jet, it would be a normal gunfight.
Mm.
But now when I fight the Neon, they're just jumping around sliding, and then I'm dead.
Mhm.
So I might have to either number one increase the space that I'm fighting the Neon, or number two fight the Neon before that interaction happens. I don't know, but that is an example of the meta that I haven't caught up on. So
Mhm.
even though I approached the mechanical side of things, like preparing for that, I think well, like I made sure I was doing my ramp routine. I was warming up to the point to where I was warming up sometimes like an hour a day. I started actually implementing a timer to cap it at 30 minutes because it was taking too
Yeah, yeah.
long. Um, I didn't do the preparation for the other side of the game, and I think that is kind of biting me in the butt a little bit.
The other thing, and I think this is maybe more out of game than in game, because maybe it is even in game. I'd love to hear what you think. But our brains can't be curious and judgmental at the same time. So, like, you're kind of like one or the other. And so, if you think about your experience, like, I can certainly think of my own. And I think that's really true for myself, where even when I disagree with something, if I am curious, then it doesn't feel so harsh. But the moment I'm just in a pure judgment, like, I have no, and this is often with my wife, I'll give a super strong opinion about something. And she's like, well, what if you think about it this way? And then I'll be thinking, also plausible. And I probably shouldn't have been so definitive and confident in my initial assessment. And I think it's just because when you're judgmental, you just zoom right to the end, you jump, you just leapfrog over several assumptions, and you're like, this must be the truth, right? And I'm just wondering, how does that, how do you think that's showing up for you in your rank gameplay right now?
I definitely have had that experience. I think in the ranked play specifically, I judge my individual performance based on scoreline or with duels, and I also judge my teammates based on what I would expect them to do, not why they're doing what they do. An example would be going back to Abyss. Um, I don't like to contest A main that much on Abyss. It doesn't feel straightforward. There's like that little ramp ledge that they have, the
On
angle that you
defense,
have
you don't like
on
contesting
defense.
on defense.
Correct. And like the box like that's there is wall bangable, so it's like not great to contest. So when I play that bomb site, I like to just play for the hold. And when I play for the hold, I like my second teammate to be heaven, and then to throw a util through heaven. The problem is sometimes I get my teammate backside with me, or they're the mid player, and then I'm playing on site alone. And me being a controller player in this example, I do my best to try to get a kill and get out. The problem is I'm judging my teammate on how he's playing. Let's say he fights a main and dies. I'm not going to support him. I'm going to be like, oh yeah, you got that. Like I can't really help you. Maybe I'll break your dart or something. But like in my head, I don't think it's a good play. But if I were to be curious, I'm thinking about it now. Like, why would he contest A main? Well, that's a free orb for them. You could probably deny the orb, which is cool. The other thing too is if they don't start A main, you get a pretty quick flank mid. Like, there's reasons why you would do something like that. And I think it kind of goes back to me thinking about the game that I had it solved in a way. Like, I want to say like I have it solved. Like, I can acknowledge like I know less about the game and how to win a game compared to say any ranked player that's really good. Like Oxy
Mhm.
is a really good pro and he's on the rank, like really good on the ladder.
Mhm.
Or like Curry, for example. It's like I know that they know more than me, but I was kind of viewing myself in a higher understanding of the game compared to my
Yeah.
teammates. So I would immediately judge them. And let's just entertain the idea that that is true. It doesn't allow me to learn from my teammates or even the way the enemy is playing. It's just I'm at a fixed state if I approach the game that way, and I won't ever improve. Whereas like if I try to take the mentality of learning from everyone or from every game, then I can actually improve. And I know it sounds obvious, but it hasn't played out that way.
There's a distinction between being right and being useful. So I remember one time I was complaining to a mentor of mine where I was called into these meetings and I wasn't really there to give an opinion. And I had this really strong alternative opinion. And he said, the thing is, you might be 100% right that if they just listened to you, everything would go perfectly. But it doesn't matter because they haven't asked you for that. And so you voicing in your opinion won't be right because they're not going to listen. So you're going to have to figure out a different way of looking at that situation. And I think similarly, that's kind of true here. Even if we were to say that 100% of your understanding of this game was correct and the meta hasn't changed, if you're 100% right, but your teammates can't or won't listen to you, then it's effectively, it doesn't really matter, right? I'm almost wondering if the curiosity is less around your game sense has allowed you to understand the game at a really high level that got you to high radiant before. The meta has changed, and you're also playing with a different caliber of players right now. You're not back at radiant yet. And so that game sense has almost hardened into this hard understanding of the game. Like it just sounds super rigid. You're like, this is the way to play. And I'm just wondering if really the solution is that game sense comes back in a fluid way. You can reinterpret the game using your game sense for what it is like right now amongst these teammates and what it could look like to help you win that game instead of this is the way I believe it to be and you're all wrong.
So I guess where should I start with this? There's a clarifying point in that my MMR is still, I think, Radiant MMR. So
Okay.
in the first week, the last game I played in the first week, everyone in the game was Radiant except me. So there was 9
Okay. So
Radiants,
you
and then
you are playing Radiant game then. Effectively.
but I think there's 2 different types of games I'm playing right now. Where if I'm in a high level Radiant lobby, I think the way that I approached the game before still works. And actually, just recently, um, yesterday, a little bit of context before that, I was on a crazy loss streak. It was like 6 or 7, 8 losses, something like that. And then I get into this game with Radiance. I had there was like a duo queue from players from Winthrop, Infiltrator and Nazi. Very good players. I knew that, right? So I decided to fill that game and I played KO on Ascent. And I literally just exercised what I knew before when I played KO on Ascent ages ago. Because I haven't played KO in ranked in ages. But like I used to play KO in ranked a long time ago when I used to play KO in tourney play. And I literally just did what I thought was right and it worked. And that's where the game sense thing was the same.
Mm.
And that's because that lobby I think was higher
Yeah.
level. But where I'm finding the separation is when I'm in those like there's like the 2 tiers, I guess, like the high radiant and the low radiant. When I'm playing in the high radiant, but I'm not an agent that I'm comfortable on. Let's say I'm filling Cypher
Yes.
and it's like a full radiant lobby, I do terrible,
Mm.
right? But the inverse is true too, where I'm playing, say, my predetermined playbook, but I'm in that lower tier game and it's not matching, right? So I think it's almost a matter of like I need to match ideally my understanding of the game with the level of the
Mhm.
lobby and then also approach the curiosity when I'm in a lower rank lobby.
Well, it's almost like realizing that it's almost not dissimilar to a physical capability, right? If you're in the NBA, if you throw a lob, the guy can dunk it from anywhere. But if you're throwing a lob to a bunch of guys like me, like I couldn't dunk it to save my life, right? And so the reality is, I think you're throwing alley oops in those lower games, and it's not working because they don't have the physical capacity or capability of dunking it for you, right? Whereas that gameplay is working, and so it's almost like you needing to be able to flip your mindset between those two types of games.
It's a very tough thing too because I think in my play style and the agents I play, and just the way that I've learned the game, I rely on a good teammate to do certain things. Like I play the best when I have a player that's also playing well next to me because it like levels up my gameplay as well. And there's like a lot more nuance I can get into. Stuff.
What are the things that you can control in your games to make that happen, even when you're playing with a lower MMR lobby?
The first thing that I think of would be coordinating better, like setting up the pre-round plan and stuff like that. But I know that that is an answer that works sometimes, but not all the time. Because the games, the way it does work, it feels like I'm right back where I was for the most part. And when it doesn't go that way, I feel lost. So I think maybe it would be more of a matter of simplifying and trying to figure out their intentions and then playing off of it, even if I don't think it's the right way to play, which kind of goes against my philosophy of the game.
Mm,
I like my philosophy of the game is if I have a plan, I want to calm it and then work on that plan
mhm,
because my teammates probably won't call it a plan.
mhm.
But if that plan isn't working, oh, I actually have an example. Sunset defense. I like to one way A and then fight A.
Yes. Okay.
So sometimes I'll play Omen. I'll play on A site, one way flash.
Are you one weighing the like when they're rounding the corner? Or you're one weighing the box, like kind of right side of sight when you're on defense,
The first one, right off
right off
barrier,
barrier.
just
Okay.
one way
Okay.
right off
Okay.
barrier, and then flash that line. That's how I like to approach defense A site, and I have that plan. And I've tried numerous times this past week, the week before, probably like just this entire time I've been playing to get my teammates to fight for that space.
Yeah. So
And
because you can't fight for it because you're one weighing and flashing.
yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it's incredibly frustrating when I know that that would work. And I'm not thinking about what they want to do or how they're positioned to fight that. I'm just like, I'm one weighing A, I'm flashing it. Can we fight? Can we fight? Can we fight? And then it turns out like they just don't fight it, or maybe they get scared and they run away instead of using more util to continue fighting that choke. And then that ruins my whole plan. Now I don't have blind.
You know what's interesting is and I think this applies here. The best coaches across sports don't make players fit their system. They make the system fit the player. If you can only make players fit your system, then you're not a great coach. You're just depending on having great players that fit the way you want to play the game. That doesn't show any level of strategic insight or capability. It just means you know one way of doing things and you do it well. I think here you're kind of almost adopting that mindset. Like this is the right way to play. And if you don't do it, you're wrong. But I think if we were thinking of someone who can get into the top 10 of the ranked Radiant ladder, they're going to have the same teammates sometimes too. And so they're going to know that that's like, I just imagine like, let's say Xander thinks it's the right play too. And it doesn't work. The players aren't listening. He will adopt his gameplay to make that work instead of just being angry that no one's listening.
It makes me think of Fnatic and Loud. Like I think Fnatic's coach was saying the reason why they run their Haven comp is because they have the roster they do. Like you can put Alpha Hair on ISO and you can put Durka on Yoru and play a double duelist team just because you have those type of players. And Loud, like Sadhak has to have like he's worked with so many different players at this point, and they're known for having some strange comps because they're trying to accommodate their players.
Accommodate the capacity and the skill sets of their players.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a better approach.
Here's the other one too. I just want to throw it there.
Sure.
There's a protocol called, I think we've talked about this before. I don't know if we've talked on the podcast. There's a protocol called nonviolent communication.
Mm.
And where it's particularly helpful, I find, is to diagnose our own self-talk and diagnose the reactions of others. And so I think it's kind of in some ways the antidote to fundamental attribution error when we attribute to others based on their character and we attribute to ourselves based on intention. So the framework is you first observe like what happened, you say how it made you feel, You think about what the need is you have that drove that feeling, and then and this doesn't really work as well for self-talk, but you make a request, right? So like, um, when you are getting really frustrated with a teammate, he didn't respond to your call. So that's objective. You said it, he didn't follow it. That's objective. What do you think he is feeling in the game that would make him not respond to your call if you were to just put yourself in his position?
Maybe overwhelmed with a bunch of stuff going on.
Yeah, maybe this is the highest lobby he's ever played in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then what do you think the need is of driving that feeling? What do you think what do you think internally is driving that feeling?
I don't know, fear maybe.
This is the hard one because people are pretty decent at analyzing the feelings. It's hard for us to think about the needs we have that drive our feelings. I think it could be that. It could be wanting to be liked, like wanting to belong and feeling like he can't. Um, and so when like I guess when you think through that on behalf of another player, how does your feeling to that player change?
It feels like it's less personal and more of like I can kind of understand where they're coming from. So like de-escalates the thoughts, I guess.
I think there's an element when he doesn't, because I know the feeling. You're like, just well, we're gonna walk up, and then this guy runs, and you're like, do you not understand like the words that are coming out of my mouth, right?
Literally.
Like, literally, I just said walk, but more often than not, it's because they're thinking about something else, right? And so like we're taking everything happen that we were taking everything that's happening in that game, like we are the main character, right? And I think like this framework just allows us to have some humanization of others. And I think it allows us when we analyze our own self-talk, similarly, it gives us the ability to humanize ourselves. Like I used this recently, not recently at all. This is like 8 months ago now. I was skiing. I was like on the local mountain, and I was before I went skiing. I had like skis on my shoulders, and my poles were stuck on my skis, and they were like winged out, and there was no one around, so no big deal. But then it got like really tight, and I had to like swing the poles because they almost like poke someone. I'm like, ooh, that was close. And then this ski instructor comes up to me. He's like, "Put down your poles. You almost poked someone's eyes out." He was like super aggressive and super angry. And I was like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, what a jerk. Like, how could he talk to me like that? And so when I did this like analysis of my own self-talk, I was like, oh, I'm feeling really challenged right now. And the reason I'm feeling challenged, my need is because I want people to think like like a safe, responsible guy. I'm a dad. Like I want to be known as safe and responsible. Like it's so out of my character to not be. So I was almost like trying to protect myself that I am, but I had to admit that I did do something dangerous. And I'm like, okay, if I can just admit that I did do something slightly dangerous, but that I am generally safe, I can give myself a little bit of grace. But then when I did the analysis for him, like, so he talked to me like super aggressively. Okay, like what was he feeling? He's probably feeling anxious and a bit angry. And I'm like, okay, why is he feeling anxious and a bit angry? And I was like, oh, well, he's feeling anxious and really angry because like he actually just wants people to be able to ski and ski safely. And so of course he doesn't want to get someone's eyes or to get a pull in the face, not even on the mountain. Like he wants people to be able to enjoy themselves. And so the moment like I thought through that, I was like, well, I still didn't appreciate that he spoke to me that way, but like I totally understand. And I'm like, it's actually kind of fair. And I was just like, it was interesting because when I was able to run through this exercise for myself, I was able to like let go of my frustration, and I was able to also kind of like let go of my frustration towards him. Like I understand where he's coming from and it's okay. And I think like you probably can't be doing this in round when you're getting executed on
Right.
and your teammate isn't there, but like you certainly have 30 seconds while you're dead and certainly 30 seconds pre-round when you've bought everything to just allow yourself to do this for yourself so you can not be in this like super, what's the word, tilted state, and you can be playing like with your team instead of almost like against your own team.
What comes to mind for me is a question or like a perspective of in order to really do these things, we kind of have to get over the fact that we are controlling what we can control, that internal locus of control, and not expecting that in return. Because 9 out of 10 players in Valorant probably aren't doing anything like this. Like they
I,
haven't had.
I guarantee it's like not even close. But that doesn't prevent you from doing it. But I
Right.
think the other part too is like it's not just internal locus control. I think it's like there's an element of feeling like you're entitled to win. And I don't know a better way to put this, that you are no longer a student of the game. You're no longer respecting that it's hard and that it's hard at every single level, you know? And I think when you respect the game, then you can just dedicate yourself to doing the things you control, and the outcomes are the outcomes, right? Like, I feel like, in a way, being solely focused and tied to an outcome actually limits your ability to be present and enjoy the game for what it is, right? I think there's an element of what you're kind of running through right now that really displays a real lack of presence, right? We're so like outside of what's going on and what's next and what can I do now, and more in what are they doing wrong.
It brings me back to what Roy or Stronglegs was saying, that he thinks like 80% of it is mental to be a pro. And then that comes, like when I think of that, I think the player that comes to mind is Aspas. And Saucy was saying, like in a clip somewhere, that uh, kind of like retaliating against people that were hating on Aspas because they were saying Aspas is a baiting duelist. And Saucy was basically defending Aspas, saying if his teammate makes a mistake, he's going to let that teammate make the mistake and he's going to kind of do what he's doing. So if he's supposed to be dashing out for his teammates, but he doesn't have the util that is sufficient to do so, he won't dash out for his team. Or maybe if his teammate goes for a solo peek and he could have tried to go for, say, 1 or 2 steps behind of a peek. I'm just throwing this example out there. I don't know if this is actually practical. He might not go for that. He might just play his position. And that that is a interesting mindset, I guess, because I've heard the saying that a good play or a bad play done together is better than a great play not done at all. And it doesn't seem like, from the narrative that I heard from this clip, and it's just a clip, that Aspas is maybe not taking that idea in. But it might just be more nuanced to it than that. But
I think
yeah,
there's like these heuristics, these rules of thumb are mostly correct, but they're more to guide us rather than to be, they're not immutable laws, like they can be broken, right? And I think Nassim Taleb, he is a investor guy. He's written like a bunch of famous books. He's like really brutal to read, so I would not recommend you read him. But he talks about this idea of the best investors are not the ones you look at in a cycle. Like the guy that's doing well in a cycle um, can look way better than Warren Buffett. In fact, a lot of people have. Like a lot of people have written about in multiple times how Warren Buffett is washed relative to the Bitcoin dudes or the dot com people. But he says you can't look at how people do in the cycle. You have to look across cycles. And so when you look across cycles, like Warren Buffett's still the GOAT, right? And so similarly, I think if you look at just Aspas's performance over the years, ups and downs, good teams and not good teams, he's been equally valuable.
insane.
He was he was he was the leader of that Loud team when they were dominant, and he was still amazing when they were bad. So I think when you look at that, there's not really much room at all to question that guy's decision making. I think his decision making is arguably like perfect until we see someone do better than that, right? And so that's just what comes to mind for me is maybe he's surpassed that level of heuristic of like a bad play is a good play if you do it together. He's even beyond that, and we don't really understand it because we're not in his brain, right? And it's clear that I don't think, irrespective of aim, like because there have been players that have approached him on aim, there hasn't been a player yet that has approached him in terms of consistency and the level of impact, right? Like Like Demon won for 1 year, like what yay for that 1 year in the chamber meta, but no one has approached Aspas for 3 years in total. Like if you look at the average,
It's very interesting, and he's kind of young too, which is surprising. Well,
and very chill. Like his whole thing of like during timeouts, he's literally like
lean back by me.
he's
Yeah, it's so
so
good.
he's so relaxed. Like you kind of, if he wasn't such a great player, you'd be like, he doesn't care enough, you know? But like it's clear he knows what works for him.
It's definitely interesting. I think I know my mental's always going to be an ongoing thing, but like looking back on how it's kind of came out and based on my experience before, like I would have, I guess, expected better, but everything is like hindsight in
Mhm.
the past. And it goes to show that the idea of having it figured out is false.
Mhm.
Like it has to be an ongoing thing. And it's a good reminder. It's like it's very humbling, I guess, to to know that there's always work to be done.
Well, and I think it goes to show that it's a practice of getting better at things. The world is moving. I remember, I think it was in Broken by Concept. They were looking at the season 3 world League of Legends versus like season 10, and it's like the LCS players in season 10 could have beaten the Korean world players because the game had advanced so much. In a game that we thought was relatively like well known and solved, it wasn't at all. And I think it's similar here. We'll get more out of it when we respect the hardness of the game at every single level, and that we're always going to have to put work in. But I think that's the part of the allure of any competitive game, is that it is a craft, and any craft requires your effort to put in. It just doesn't kind of hold on its own.
It's a good reframe.
What are you going to implement for this next week?
Preparing game sets wise for maps. I think that's the most practical thing to start with, and then in the games, trying to be a little bit more curious rather than judging. Like maybe even just asking my teammates, "What were you thinking here?" But in not that way. Like I probably shouldn't use those words.
What were you thinking?
What were you thinking? Um, but yeah, just avoiding judgment and thinking like I have the right plays, because I could see myself, if I don't take that step and I just take the first step of just reviewing, then that might solidify my viewpoint on, oh, I'm doing this, this, and this. Xander played it this way. We need to be doing this, and I need to be more flexible. Xander does it this way, but I still need to figure out why my teammates are doing XYZ thing.
Well, that was a cool conversation. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope you got something out of this. Please let us know in the comments. We are still working on the community. We should have an announcement on that soon. So we will let you know when that's ready. As always, thank you for tuning in, and thanks for being fans. Have a great day and the rest of your week.